brother-in-law's truck was parked in my parents' driveway. That was the first thing I saw when I turned onto their street. His truck. The big black one with the contractor decals on the side. The one he washes every Saturday like it's something he earned. Sitting in front of the house I'd spent 14 months and over $90,000 restoring for them. I sat in my car for a second. Just sat there. My lawyer had told me, when we finalized everything in January, to always bring the original documents the first time I was handing over a property to family. It sounds paranoid, she said, but I've been doing this for 22 years and I've seen things you wouldn't believe. I laughed at the time. I told her she didn't know my family. I reached into my bag and checked that the folder was there. Then I got out of the car. I should explain how we got here, because it didn't start with the truck in the driveway. It started, like most things in my family, with something small, a comment at Christmas dinner 3 years ago. My brother-in-law talking about how my parents' neighborhood was appreciating fast, how their house was sitting on a gold mine, how smart people don't let assets sit idle. My dad nodded politely. My mom changed the subject. My sister smiled at her husband the way she always smiles at him, like he's saying something clever. I didn't say anything either, I just watched. My parents have lived in the same house in Guelph for 31 years. It's not a big house. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a backyard that backs onto a creek. My dad planted a garden there in 1997 that he still tends every spring, even now that his knees make it hard to crouch. My mom has a room at the back. She calls her sewing room, though she doesn't sew anymore. She just goes in there to read and drink her tea and have some quiet. They raised my sister and me in that house. They paid it off 11 years ago. It was theirs, fully and cleanly theirs, and they were happy there. That's the thing people don't always understand about my parents. They were unhappy. They weren't struggling. They didn't need saving. What they needed, what I wanted to give them, was certainty. My dad had a health scare in 2022. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to make us all sit with some uncomfortable thoughts. And I kept thinking, what happens if something shifts? What happens if one of them needs care and the costs get complicated and the house becomes a question mark? I'm a paralegal. I work in estate planning. I see those question marks turn into crises for families every single year, and I was not going to let that happen to mine. So I started planning. I'm not going to pretend I'm some kind of financial genius. I'm 31 years old and I drive a 10-year-old Civic and I pack my lunch almost every day. But I'd been saving since I was 23, aggressively, because I'd always known I wanted to do something meaningful with the money rather than spend it on things I didn't need. I had help. I worked with a financial planner. I made choices that sometimes felt like a lot of sacrifice in the moment, and by early last year, I had enough. $92,000. Not to rebuild the house. It didn't need that. What it needed was updates that would make it genuinely livable and safe for them as they got older. The roof had been patched twice and needed to be replaced properly. The basement was unfinished and damp, and my dad had started mentioning, more often than I was comfortable with, that it smelled. The kitchen was from 1994. The main floor bathroom had a tub my mom had to climb over, and after she slipped on the mat one morning and grabbed the towel bar to catch herself, I stopped sleeping well. I hired a contractor, someone I found through a colleague, properly vetted, licensed, insured. I told my parents the house was getting some routine inspections that a friend of mine was helping coordinate. My mom asked if she needed to be home. I said no, I'd handle it. She said okay and went back to her tea. The work took 14 months. New roof, properly waterproofed and finished basement. Not fancy, just clean and dry and usable. Renovated kitchen, new cabinets, new counters, new appliances that don't require manual intervention to start running, and the bathroom. A full walk-in shower with a bench and handrails. A heated floor because my mom's circulation has never been great. A wider doorway because my occupational therapist friend told me that's the thing people never think about until they need it, and then it's too late. I also worked with an estate lawyer, not my own firm, someone independent, to set up a life interest arrangement for my parents. They have full, unrestricted right to live in and enjoy their home for the rest of their lives. The decisions about the property after they're gone rest with me. I paid for those legal arrangements myself. I did not tell my sister they existed. I want to be honest here, because I've thought about that decision a lot. Was it the right thing to do, not to tell her? I think about how she would have reacted if I had told her. I think about her husband. And I think, yes, it was the right thing to do. I planned to tell my parents everything in March, when the work was finally done. I'd take them out to dinner, bring them back to the house, walk them through every room. I'd been imagining that moment for over a year. My dad's face when he saw the basement, my mom stepping into the new shower. When I turned onto their street and saw the truck, I felt something drop in my stomach. I went to the door and knocked. My mom opened it. She looked at me with an expression I didn't understand at first. Not happy, not upset, just very carefully arranged, the way her face gets when she's trying not to show that something is wrong. "You're here," she said. "I told you I was coming today," I said. "Is everything okay?" She stepped back and let me in. My brother-in-law was in the living room. He was standing with his arms crossed, which is how he stands when he's decided he's the most important person in the space. My sister was on the couch. She didn't look at me when I came in. My dad was in the armchair by the window, the one he's had since before I was born. He looked at me and I saw something in his face that I had never seen there before. He looked embarrassed. He looked like he was ashamed of something that wasn't his fault. "Bren," my brother-in-law said, using the nickname I have never once asked him to use. "Good timing. We were just having a family conversation." "About what?" I said. He spread his hands in a way that was probably meant to look reasonable. He's a general contractor. He builds things and he talks about money, the way some people talk about sports, constantly, like everyone else is just learning the rules he already mastered. "Your parents' place," he said. "It's been upgraded significantly. That affects its value. That affects what it could be doing for this family instead of just sitting here." I looked at my sister. She was examining her hands. "What do you mean, what it could be doing?" I said. He shrugged. "Rental income, the basement alone, finished the way it is, you're looking at a legal secondary suite situation. 1,300 a month minimum. Your parents don't use it. That money could be helping everyone." "My parents use it," I said. "It's their basement in their home." "It's a family asset," he said. "We're all family here. The value that went into this property came from family." I looked at my dad again. His hands were clasped in his lap. He was looking at the floor. "Where did you get that idea?" I said. "That the value came from family." My brother-in-law smiled the way people smile when they think they've already won. "I did some checking. What was done to this house, the roof, the basement, the kitchen, all of it, that's not some small DIY weekend project. That's a serious investment. And investments in family property belong to the family." I asked my dad quietly whether he told them. He shook his head once. "No." "I have some documents I'd like to share," I said. My brother-in-law laughed, an actual laugh, short and dismissive. "Documents?" "Yes," I said. I set my bag on the coffee table and I took out the folder. The first thing I took out was the original purchase agreement for the renovation work. Contracted and paid in full by me, personally. My name, my account. 14 months of receipts. I set it on the table. The second thing was the legal opinion letter from the estate lawyer, which explained in plain and direct language the life interest arrangement that had been registered on title at the Ontario Land Registry. My parents hold life interest, full right of use and enjoyment, irrevocable, for as long as either of them lives. Not transferable, not subject to partition, not something any other family member could make a claim on. I set that on the table too. The third thing, and I want to be honest, I didn't plan this one as theatrically as it might sound. My lawyer had just insisted I always carry it, was the letter from the landlord and tenant board explaining that a property with an existing life interest arrangement cannot be listed for rental use by a third party without the consent of the life interest holder. My parents had not consented. My parents had not been asked. I said, "He listed the basement on Marketplace. I found it this morning." My dad looked up. My sister said very quietly, "You what?" "I was getting ahead of it," my brother-in-law said. "There's no harm in seeing what the interest was." "You listed my parents' home," I said, "for rent, without asking them, without telling me, without any legal standing to do so." The room was quiet. He said something about how I was being dramatic. He said something about how this was a family matter and bringing lawyers into it was poisoning everything. He said I was trying to cut my sister out, which was, and I'm still thinking about this one, a remarkable thing to say, given the circumstances. My sister was still looking at her hands. My mom had come to stand in the doorway from the kitchen. She was holding a dish towel. She had been listening for a while, I think. "I'd like you to leave," my mom said. She wasn't talking to me. My brother-in-law looked at her like he hadn't heard correctly. "I'd like you and my daughter to go home," my mom said. Her voice was completely calm. She'd spent 31 years raising 2 kids in that house, and she knew exactly how to use that room. "We'll talk again when things are clearer." My sister finally looked up. She looked at our mom. Then she stood up, picked up her jacket, and walked past me without making eye contact. Her husband followed her. He paused in the doorway and started to say something else. I genuinely don't remember what, because I had stopped listening to him somewhere around the third time he said family asset, and then he didn't say it and he left. The door closed. For a moment, none of us said anything. My dad made a sound that was almost a laugh. Not a happy one, the kind that comes out when something is just too much to hold as any other emotion. He said, "I didn't know about the listing until an hour ago. Someone in the neighborhood texted me a screenshot." "I know, Dad." "I didn't." He stopped. "I wouldn't have." "I know," I said. "I know you wouldn't." My mom came into the living room and sat down next to him. She reached over and put her hand on his, and he turned his over and held it. They'd been married 38 years. They still do that, just reach for each other without thinking about it. I told them everything then. All of it, the 14 months, the planning, the legal structure, and why I'd set it up that way, what it protected them from, what it meant for them going forward. I told them what the life interest meant in plain terms. They could never be made to leave, never be pressured, never have the rug pulled out from under them. The house was theirs, fully and completely, for as long as they lived. My dad asked about the cost. I told him. He was quiet for a long time. "You should have told us," he said finally. "We would have said no." "I know," I said. "That's partly why I didn't." He laughed again, and this time it was the real one. We walked through the house. My mom went into the new kitchen and ran her hand along the counter. She opened the cabinet above the stove that I'd had installed at a lower height because she's shorter than me and had always needed the step stool, and she just stood there looking at it. She didn't say anything. I wasn't expecting her to. My dad went down to the basement. It's clean now, properly lit, a low-humidity space with a small sitting area and built-in shelving along one wall. He'd been talking for years about setting up a proper space for his model railway. Just talking, never expecting it to happen. I had left one long section of shelving, specifically at the right height and depth. He didn't say anything about that either. He just stood there and looked at it. Then he went upstairs and stood on the small deck off the back bedroom that we'd extended slightly during the reno, and he looked out at his garden. The creek was visible beyond the fence. He'd told me once, years ago, when I was maybe 10, that one of his favorite things in the world was watching the light change over that water in the evening. He'd said it the way people say things when they don't expect to be remembered. I remembered. He stood there for a while without saying anything, and I stood a few feet back and let him be in it. The situation with my sister didn't resolve cleanly. I want to be accurate about this. I know sometimes these stories get told in a way where the villain is defeated and everyone else comes together and there's a clear lesson at the end. Real life is messier than that. My sister called me 2 days later. She was upset, genuinely upset, not performing it, and she said she hadn't known about the listing, that she found out from him that day, same as everyone else. I believe her, actually. I don't think she knew. I think she has spent a long time not knowing things that were easier not to know, and that is its own kind of complicated. I told her I wasn't angry at her. I meant it mostly. I told her what I'd set up and why. She was quiet for a long time. She asked if our parents were happy with it. I said yes. She said okay. We haven't talked much since, but we haven't stopped talking either. That's where we are. Her husband sent me a text about a week later that said he was going to look into whether my arrangement was challengeable. I forwarded it to my lawyer. She sent back 2 words. Let him. He hasn't followed up. I think about something my dad said on that first evening after we'd walked through the house and come back and sat in the living room with tea. He said, "What you did, it wasn't just the money, was it?" I said no, it wasn't just the money. He said, "What was it then?" I thought about how to answer that. I thought about the years I'd spent watching families come into our office, good people who'd waited too long or trusted too much, or just never thought to set anything in writing. I thought about my dad's face when I walked in and found him sitting in that chair, embarrassed, holding something that wasn't his fault. I said, I just didn't want there to ever be a question. He nodded. He looked out the window toward the backyard, where the light was going soft over the fence. There's a kind of gift that you give not because the person is lacking something, but because you want them to be able to stop worrying about a thing they've been quietly worrying about for years. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need a bow on it. It's the walk-in shower with the heated floor. It's the basement that doesn't smell anymore. It's the document that says, in legal language, in registered language, in the kind of language that holds up in any room, this is yours. It will always be yours. No one can take it from you. My dad watches the light change over the creek most evenings now. He doesn't have to be anywhere else. That was the whole idea. I keep coming back to the moment my dad turned his hand over in my mom's and held it. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. 38 years of knowing each other, and that small gesture was enough. I'd spent 14 months and every dollar I carefully set aside working toward that moment. And I'm not sure I even knew that's what I was working toward until I saw it. I thought a lot about what my brother-in-law expected to happen that day. I think he expected hesitation. He expected that nobody had thought it through, that the legal side was soft, that if he came in confident and used the right language, family asset, collective benefit, shared investment, the room would rearrange itself around him. That's how it had worked before, I think. In smaller situations I'd let pass without pushing back. Confidence mistaken for authority, volume mistaken for validity. What he didn't account for was that I'd been paying attention, not just to him, to everything, to the way these situations unfold when there's no paperwork, when love is assumed to be protection enough and then it isn't. I work in estate planning. I have sat across from families who waited too long, who trusted too much, who figured the hard conversation could happen later. Later comes faster than people think. I wasn't willing to let later catch my parents unprepared. There's something I've come to believe, not from a book or a course, but just from watching what actually happens to people over time. The ones who protect the people they love aren't always the loudest or the most dramatic. They're the ones who do the quiet work first, who ask the uncomfortable questions before there's a crisis, who build the thing that holds, not the thing that looks good in the moment. That's not a cold or calculated way to love someone. I think it might be the most honest way. My sister and I haven't repaired things fully. I don't know if we will, not completely. That used to feel like a failure to me, like something I should have been able to prevent or fix. I'm not sure anymore. Some damage comes from choices that were made long before the moment of confrontation, and the confrontation just makes it visible. I can be honest about what happened without needing it to resolve neatly. She knows I love her. I believe she loves me. What's between her and her husband is something I can't reach into and change, and I stopped trying. What I can do, what I did, was make sure my parents didn't have to be afraid in their own home. That was the whole project, underneath all the receipts and contracts and registered documents. Not the roof or the shower or the finished basement, though those matter too. The real thing was just, I didn't want them lying awake, worrying about something that I had the ability to prevent. My dad stands on that back deck most evenings now. He looks at his garden, at the creek beyond the fence, at the light going soft over the water. He told me once when I was small that watching that light change was one of his favorite things in the world. He said it the way you say something you'd stopped expecting to matter to anyone else. I remembered. That's the thing about paying attention. It compounds. What you notice becomes what you protect. What you protect becomes what lasts.